Aloha. Welcome to the Mr. G podcast, episode 3, numero tres, for all our bilingual listeners. Now that started shitty. All right. What am I doing here? Maybe I should have brushed my fucking teeth, huh? That would have been good. Hopefully you guys are listening and not watching because I there, I look a little bit better now. Taking off the broken glasses and the Adidas hat. Seriously, welcome if you're watching on a video or if you're listening. The Mr. G podcast, Mr. G Hawaii, Gregory Brandt. There's a few Mr. G's, but I'm pretty sure I'll stand out from the rest eventually, at least. Um, the Mr. G podcast, you can listen to it on Amazon or Apple Podcast. So go to Apple iPhone, just search Mr. G, or tell your Alexa or whatever your AI is and tell them to play the Mr. G podcast. So I'm really happy about that. I'm going to put it on a few other platforms as well. This is episode 3 today. And I don't know if you can hear the coffee in the background. The mic is pretty good. The mic is a Logitech mic. And I heard some people say like, oh, he just sounds so good because of the mic. No, I'm using like a mid-range mic. It's just a lot of people, it's the first time they've heard me with a microphone. Any other videos you may have seen or any live streams you may have seen, you've just heard me on a shitty phone mic. So it's awesome to be able to use this mic. After today's podcast, which is going to be basically about basketball, about for the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to talk hoops. My first official guest on the show, I just sent a message to Victor Wembanyama and asking him if he would be my first guest on the Mr. G podcast. So if you're out there, Victor, if you're hearing this message, let's change the world together for the best. Butterfly effect, and you'll be my first guest. The number one NBA draft prospect from France, most the most exciting sports, the most exciting player to come up in sports, the most exciting draft prospect in the history of team sports. And I was just watching some of his highlights. I've been watching basketball for 35 years, longer than that, really, since 1988, probably. I started watching basketball the year before David Robinson was drafted as the number 1 pick. But I watched some highlights of Victor yesterday, Victor Wembanyama, and he's done some things. Wemby, his name is Wemby. All right, let's just call him Wemby. So Wemby is 7'5" and extremely agile. Normally in basketball, previously, any 7-foot tall players, especially 7'2", 7'3", 7'4", they're generally, with due respect, they're awkward, and not just in basketball, in life. Sometimes they walk really awkward. They a lot of times they speak with the I'm George Morrison. I am a giant with Billy Crystal. Or sometimes, they're just kind of like not they're just not like as sociable. But Wemby is totally different as far as his personality, his character. He's suave and smooth like a Frenchman, and he's not awkward at all. It's like he's James Bond in a 7'5" body. And it also goes the same on the basketball court. Generally big men in the history of the NBA, 7 foot tall or taller than 7 feet players. I'm thinking like Sean Bradley, George Morrison, Adrianus Sabonis. Generally, they're pretty, awkward players on the court. They're kind of slow. Not Sabonis. Sabonis was in a different category. But generally 7 foot plus players, with the exception of Shaquille O'Neal, who just hit 7 feet, barely, probably. They generally don't have good footwork. They don't have good hands. I've never seen a basketball player this good. There was a highlight I saw yesterday for the first time where he shot a 3-point shot. Wemby is shooting a 3-point shot, and the shot is off, and he knows it's off, and he runs to the basket and he dunks. He put back dunks his 3-point miss. I've never seen that in any level of basketball. I know that happened months ago, but I first saw it yesterday, and I've never seen any player do that. The closest that anything like that has ever happened is, I believe, once in the NBA basketball, a player was shooting a free throw, maybe it was Michael Jordan or LeBron James, and they missed the free throw and they put back their own free throw with a dunk. That's happened once or twice in the NBA. It's so rare. But for a player that far away from the basket to dunk their three, it's like he's called an alien, because it's like he's from another planet. And that's with all the due respect, that's a compliment. Because like I said, the majority of 7 foot tall players have been awkward and stumbling, awkward on the court and awkward off the court. The Victor Wemby is not like that. He's smooth, and his game corresponds to his character and his personality. He's very sociable. You see videos. He's like the most popular kid in his school. Looks like, even if he wasn't a basketball player, he'd probably still be the most popular kid in his school. So it's a really honor that he's going to my team, the San Antonio Spurs. It's my team. I own them. No, all due respect, Peter Holt, I believe, still owns them, but the owner of the San Antonio Spurs. But no, they're the only team I've ever cheered for, with the exception of the University of Texas, where I graduated from with a degree in journalism. So I told Victor Wemby that as well. I'm like, hey, I have a degree in journalism. I just started a podcast, and you could be my first guest. Everybody wants you on their podcast, Wemby, right now. You could go on Joe Rogan if you want. You can go on any podcast in the world. But give somebody a chance, somebody that's been a lifelong Spurs fan, somebody with extreme knowledge of the game, an exceptional knowledge of the game of basketball, of pro basketball, of NBA basketball, dedicating hours and years of my life watching it. I've made thousands of dollars betting on sports. Not recently. You need money to play, but you need to pay to play. But in my life, over the course of 20, 30 years of betting on basketball, I'm guaranteed up at least, I'm up thousands of dollars. Let's just say that. Not millions, but thousands, and not hundreds of thousands. Maybe 10 at the most. But yeah, but I'm definitely up. I've only had one losing season, and I've made a lot of money betting on the Spurs. But this isn't about betting. That's a little bit taboo. We're just going to talk about basketball. And the thing is about basketball, if you don't like basketball and you're watching this, the majority of my viewers on TikTok, I have about 40,000 followers on TikTok. It's not, blowing the roof off, but it is a community, and 85% of them are women. 85 or even more than that. The majority of all my viewers are women, and they may not necessarily be basketball fans. But what I'm also really good at is taking basketball and making it universal. Basketball is my favorite sport, and I love it so much because there's all these underlines, there's all these storylines to go with it. Also, basketball, like soccer, really corresponds to life. You have a goal, which is the basket, and you're trying to put the ball into the basket. And while you're trying to achieve your goal, just like if you have a goal in life, there'll be obstacles in the way, and the obstacles is the defense, and they're trying to prevent you from that. But also in life, when you're trying to achieve a goal, you need help, and your help are your teammates. And everybody's trying to get the ball in the basket, and the defense is trying to stop that so they can get the basket and work on their own goal. And sometimes in life, just like in basketball, you're good enough to do it all on your own. You have the skills to go through the legs, behind the back, and you can cross over your defender and make it to the hole, like Victor Wemby is. But most of the time, basketball is a team sport, so you need help from teammates. So you need the ball over here. You need to bring in 2 defenders to get Wemby, and then you need to pass it down in the lane for Tony Parker. I'm just saying stuff for the open layup to the open man, or kick it in the corner for a Bruce Bowen 3, or do a side pass to Manu Ginobili for the Euro step to the basket. But just like in life, sometimes you can do it on your own, but most of the time you need help from your teammates. And just in life, you need help from other people. There are people that are talented enough to do it on their own. This is a podcast is an example of that. If life, I'd be Michael Jordan if this was corresponds to my fucking analogy. No, seriously. I've always done things on my own. I always work good on my own. Nobody's helping me with this podcast. Nobody's helping me in life. Every time I've had my own apartments and haven't really had roommates, I've always had the best success on my own. This book right here, I had very little. My first book right here, Gonzo Education, it's very highly reviewed. I'm so proud of it. It took me like 9 years to write. It starts when I drop out of high school and ends when I graduate from the second ranked journalism school in the United States. So a writing school, nonfiction writing. So that right there should tell you how good of a book it is. And I did it all on my own. I didn't go through a publishing. I didn't have a literary agent. I did every little thing, including the design, the cover, and everything like that, all on my own. And not many people can do that. But like I said, I had a degree in journalism. The majority of writing a book is editing. And so if you don't know how to edit and you're planning on just having an editor to put the commas in the right place, well, it's going to be extremely hard. And just like in basketball, if you're trying to put the ball in the hoop and you don't have the skills, you're going to need lots of help. You're going to need some of the best teammates, unless you're good enough to do it on your own. Me, I was good enough to and strong and patient enough to edit my book, and taking years to edit it and re-edit it and rewrite it and see what works. I did have help from a couple college professors that they just read it over and just gave me a few pointers on what I could do. And at the very end, I had a woman look it over for any copy errors. But yeah, so basketball corresponds to life more than any other sport. So even if you're not a fan of basketball, I tend to get people a fan of it in different ways. So uh, I've converted so many people into basketball fans you would not believe. Um, well, on the top of my head, I remember the playoffs of 2003, 20 years ago exactly to the day. I was watching the San Antonio Spurs play, and I was living at a guy named Dick's house. And I didn't like Dick, and well, no, Dick was okay, but Dick wasn't really for me. And he had a decent house, but there were some issues with Dick. And I'm just like not the kind of guy that really likes Dick every day. But anyways, this guy, his name was Dick. He didn't really like basketball. He was from Nova Scotia. I mentioned him briefly in my first book. If you're interested in more, if you want to know more about Dick, like if you really like Dick, uh, no. I'm sorry. I took that too far. No, but the man, his name is Dick, that I'm speaking about, is in the book. And he didn't like basketball, and he was from Nova Scotia. And this was 2003. The Spurs won the championship in 2003. But the best team in the league that year, the team that finished with the best record, was the Phoenix Suns. And the Phoenix Suns' best player and the MVP that year was Steve Nash. And Steve Nash was one of the first Canadian basketball players to play in the NBA. And so I was able to get Dick interested in basketball by talking about Steve Nash. The Spurs had an awesome series with the Suns that year. I remember in game one, a young Amari Stoudemire hit a backboard three-pointer to send it to overtime. And it was a great series that the Spurs pulled out at the end, and they went on to win the championship. But Dick became a lifelong basketball fan. I've also had, many girlfriends, women that I've dated that also they weren't basketball fans, but this time of year, every year, with the exception of the last few years, I just got back into basketball this year because of what happened in 2020. I was just like, it was like the wizard came out behind the curtain, and 2020 was, well, that's a whole podcast in itself. Probably tomorrow we'll talk about the 2020 playoffs, which a lot of people, including Phil Jackson, just stopped watching basketball because it was so absurd. But I'm back watching again, and this is one of the exciting playoffs that have occurred in a while. Jimmy Butler is my favorite player. He plays for the Miami Heat, and they're in a series against the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference. The Western Conference has the Denver Nuggets as the number 1 seed, and they're playing the number 7 seed, the Los Angeles Lakers. A lot of people are picking the Lakers. I think the Nuggets might sweep them because of the lack of respect that Denver has been getting. The Joker should have won MVP in most people's minds. He's the best statistically. He's the best player on paper, and their team finished with the number 1 record. Previously, in the 30 years that I've been watching basketball, even if you're not the best player statistically, if your team finishes with the number 1 record, their star player gets the MVP, a la Charles Barkley for the Phoenix Suns, his 1 MVP award. But it's a really exciting NBA season. Like I said, I like Jimmy Butler a lot. He plays for the Miami Heat. He's the only NBA player that I've ever known that's admitted that he was once homeless. And Jimmy Butler actually lived in a laundromat when he was a kid. The story goes, there's a great an award-winning Sports Illustrated article written about it. But Jimmy Butler, when he was, just a young teenager, adolescent, the story goes, his mom looked at him one day and just said, "I don't like the looks of you. You got to go." That's how Jimmy Butler puts it. And Jimmy was just like, okay. Then he left and he was homeless, and apparently he had a series of trying to sleep wherever he could. He's a long way from the NBA at that point. And he just stuck with it, and he had a growth spurt, and he just kept playing basketball, and he wasn't a star player in high school, and he wasn't the number one player in college either, but he's always proved people wrong, and he's done that because he knows his value and he knows his worth, and that's really hard to do in life, when your own parents don't know your value or don't know your worth. And I can relate to not only being homeless and living in a laundromat, which I've done before, but also having parents that don't know your value and don't know your worth. My father didn't like me or my twin brother at all, and he let us know that he didn't like us at all. And a lot of parents, they put their beliefs on their children, but our father didn't give a fuck about us, and we knew that. So growing up, leaving home at a young age, 15, 16, we were very malleable at that age because no one had ever tried to teach us anything. I remember in 1992, me and Michael were hanging out at our friends Thomas and Brandon's house, and they were a black family that lived in our mom's neighborhood. We would visit our mom occasionally, but this family like took us in and made us like one of our own. There was like a community there, and we'd watch basketball, play Sega Genesis, play Super Nintendo, and their father was a black man, and their mom was mixed, I believe, and but the mom was white actually. What am I gonna say? She's mixed. She's white. Right? The mom was fucking white. What? I'm not gonna start. Don't want to. No. Okay. So they were a mixed family, but it was a black household as far as the culture goes. And the dad, I remember one day, we were all putting away the groceries. They went to the grocery store, and everybody was putting away the groceries. And Michael, my twin brother, was putting up the peanut butter, and he put the peanut butter in the refrigerator. And then their dad, Mr. Brooks, said, "Michael, don't put that in the refrigerator. It has oil in it. It goes in the cabinet." And then Michael's like, "Oh, okay, thanks." And then he put it in the cabinet. But the thing is, nobody had ever tried to teach us anything before. Like our dad never spoke to us, and our real father in our house would never have like tried to help us or something, or been like, "Hey, put that in like no, that would never happen." So just that little thing, and both me and Michael talked about it afterwards, like, yeah, they're cool, they're actually nice, they actually treat us with respect, and we watch movies, and we were part of the family at a point. And we never had that before. We never had parents that cared about us or anything. So the Jimmy Butler story is a great story in sports, and I believe he's never saw his mother after that. It goes way further too. Jimmy Butler's father actually might be Michael Jordan. That's a whole other podcast in itself. We're gonna wrap things up here. Like I said, I was just doing about 15 minutes here. This is episode 3. If you enjoyed the 15 minutes, eventually it's going to be an hour long. I hope you guys did enjoy it. I like I said, I try to keep it universal, not just about basketball, because a lot of people are watching. They're not watching about basketball. They're watching because of me. And the majority of people, if anybody is watching, they're watching because of me, probably, and not basketball. But basketball has been a big part of my life. The kiddies just activated the RoboVac, so they're all chaotic. Basketball has been a big part of my life, and it's something that it's always been there for me. Tomorrow's podcast we'll talk about the playoffs of 2020, and that was when the first time when I realized that even though I love basketball, basketball doesn't love me. You can love something, but it's not necessarily going to love you back. But I was good at basketball. I dominated many basketball games against regular people. Like if I remember a game at an office when I worked at the Express News office in downtown Austin, and there was a lot of like tough guys, like jock guys that worked in the little sales area, and like one guy was from Dallas and he liked the Mavericks. One guy was from Houston, he liked the Rockets. I was from San Antonio, so I liked the Spurs. But we were all in Austin working at this place, and they talked so much shit because it was a sales job, a lot of testosterone, this and that. And where they kept talking about basketball, like, oh, we should go on the court. Like, oh, are you good, Greg? They called me Greg, or they didn't call me Mr. G. And they're like, are you good, G? Do you know, you're tall. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good, but I wasn't like all braggadocious or anything. And I remember, but they were like talking so much smack. But then we get out to the court, and like I tried to lower it down a little bit, but like I played really well, and it was comical even. Uh, like I guess none of them were over 6 feet, and I'm 6'3", but also I was faster and more agile, and I could jump a lot higher and dribble the ball. And so it was just like me, like just dunking on them, like just showing off basically, but not showing off, just playing really well. And it was funny because it is the exact opposite, but I didn't rub it in, and I never brought it up again at the office. I never brought up all the blocks or anything I did. I think I only dunked on them once or twice, but uh, normally you don't see anybody dunk in a game, in a pickup game. But yeah, so basketball, that's why basketball is good for me. Because on that day I kicked their ass. No. Overall, I wouldn't recommend pro sports, and it seems like sports are rigged in a lot of ways. And I could see how people would think that the draft lottery with the San Antonio Spurs winning the draft lottery. Hey, thank you for that, TikTok. Aloha. I'll check that later. But a lot of people think sports are rigged. I just before earlier today, I read an article about Antonio Brown. He's going to play football again, the wide receiver that played 10 years for the Pittsburgh Steelers, except he's going to be playing for his own team in the arena leagues. Like, he bought a football team and he's going to play for his own team. And he contacted former MVP Cam Newton, former Heisman Trophy winner, and the quarterback that played in Charlotte, and he is going to also play on the team on the Antonio Brown's Arena Football League team. So the same way that like the media is getting broken apart, like nobody watches NBC or ABC. If you go to NBC or ABC or CBS videos and you go to the comments on YouTube, they're all just making fun of CBS and NBC. Nobody agrees to the bullshit that they're trying to sell with the mainstream media. And all these different media outlets, like, just to say Joe Rogan as an example, Joe Rogan gets more listeners than NBC, ABC, and CBS combined. And those used to be the big ballers, but they ain't big ballers anymore. And I see the same thing happening with sports. People are going like independent. Same thing happening in music. People don't need record labels. They can they can upload their own music. There's platforms now for them to do that. And the big businesses are fucking falling apart. And the politicians that are paid by the big businesses are like, oh yeah, TikTok's stealing your information. Yeah, let's ban it. They're trying to ban free speech. They're trying to ban information. That's why this podcast is even more important, and a voice like mine is even more important as well. So thank you all for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. This is going to be an everyday thing. This is episode 3, and come back tomorrow. We'll talk more basketball, but we'll also talk life. So have a great day, and talk to you guys later. From me and my street cats, aloha.